Okay. See, everything is, yeah. All right. Good to see you all. Thanks so much for the amazing midterm. We had a really good time. I was very excited to see the work. I will be here also this afternoon with Ben's students because Ben is ill today. And this is not so much of a lecture, but more kind of like kind of catching up on this phase 3 transmediation and talking mainly about the spatial essay, this the kind of upcoming and now started film component of this last phase. So I'm going to be showing some examples. First, I'm going to go through some practical things, look at the brief again, and then we're going to be looking at some examples and both of our work and former students' work using Unreal Engine to make films. So please interrupt me. Maybe we can keep it kind of informal. If you have questions or you want to repeat something, or first, I just wanted to kind of look through again the phase that we are in now, that you've all started already, and this kind of little bit step-by-step kind of thinking process of probably how most of you will be working. Maybe you have other kind of processes too. But in preparation for this final design phase, we first need to kind of diagram the basic layout of the world based on the plan that you've already drawn. Put the diagram together with the non-Euclidean plan and consider how to weave them together in the film. Then you probably need to develop a storyboard. We're not going to be teaching you or showing examples of how this is done. Probably some of you have done that. I find that like in our own work and with people that work with film, what a storyboard is and how it looks, it can really be very personal. Like most of the time, I'm sure you've done it or seen kind of sketches or screenshots or ideas, what all of the key moments might look like. In this case, coming from obviously either if it's the different parts or scenes from the story, or how basically you will need, especially if you're working together, so you have a visual kind of document to refer back to. Who has done a storyboard before, kind of where you have like little squares where you draw something, where you have a little screenshot? Some of you have done this before. Yeah. I find that I would usually like start one and then I will kind of not really finish it, and then I will start working, and then I might not even come back to the storyboard actually, because it was kind of enough as a guiding principle, and then I use screenshots from the actual film as guiding principle for the different chapters. So like this film itself becomes the storyboard. It's also different when you work in.
He's not done now.
Oh, okay. I was kind of having a little party. Yeah, and then work on the key scenes, so kind of the key moments, and gradually adding further detail. And I would imagine that you probably have like maybe 3 or 4 scenes, maybe even just 2 that are the ones that are the most important, that really carries the whole thing. And the way that the rest of the film is carried into that scene or out of that scene is how the structure of the film is developed, considering things like kind of introduction, climax, when is the most important, most powerful moment? Is it right in the beginning, or is it somewhere in the middle, or even the end? And letting this kind of help you dictate the sort of temporal aspects, how slow are things, how fast are things, and then basic things like creating your. Marv is joining here. Just a bit. Creating your camera paths will also rely on how you're planning to show the film at the final review versus the screening. And I just need to. Did you introduce what's happening with the screening?
No. No.
Just quickly been to announce.
Oh, okay, yeah,
That
okay,
it
it's
would
been
happen.
announced. Yeah, cool, yeah. Work on lighting, colors. Usually if you make a film professionally, you have a professional color grader, someone who like just as a professional filmmaker who just deals with color. Obviously, in this case, we're playing all of the roles as an adapter of a play, of a stage, and then making a film of that. Optimize, improve, edit as needed. Also, just before we go deeper into talking about the making of these films, just what else do we expect to see at the final? The final, we're talking about December now. All previous work updated as necessary. So asset libraries, worldviews, non-Euclidean plans as a kind of minimum. And this might be, you might choose to show all of your original asset libraries before you start collaborating. Might be interesting. It's up to you. I would suggest that you bring it all, but like as part of the kind of exhibition that you put together. But otherwise, the sort of updated asset library that is of the now shared project, same with the worldviews. So this is basically, we could consider them also either, so the worldviews would be of the project you did individually. If you worked alone, it would be from the first phase, which would probably be quite different from what you're working on now. Architectural drawing package of stage sets. We leave all scales, all sizes, all kind of other requirements up to you, depending on maybe like you are developing a stage set that has a lot of vertical changes, like things are moving up and down a lot, in which case you might need a lot of elevations or a lot of section drawings. In other cases, maybe everything happens with things moving around in plan, in which case you might need a very special kind of plan drawing. But it's not a diagram. It's a, the way you would draw a space. So this would not really show necessarily the narrative, what happens, colors, lights, etc. It's a kind of, can consider it a line drawing of just the mechanics and the space, yeah. Views, 4 to 5. You might have 30. I would suggest that you have kind of a small number that you print really large, frame them or something that you really like, so that the audience really knows like this is the most representative visual description of what the adaptation is like. Key architectural details, also up to you, depending on maybe you have a really special and unique mechanical design for something, or it's up to you. You will discuss with your mentor kind of what that might be and within the group. And spatial video essay, minimum 3 minutes. I would say no longer than maximum 10 minutes, I think. Obviously, that having said, you can't fit the whole play in 10 minutes, hence the essay part. So we're going to be talking about how to do this, how to structure this, how do you describe it, how do you describe the project in a film. 3 minutes is equal to about 500 words of script. We also talk about how much script, how much voiceover, how much no voiceover do we have. We've seen some examples of that. And the resource map. With the spatial video essay here, I'm going to explain that, but basically that also includes the submission for the final review in December and the screening, of which there are some slight variations that we're going to be describing. You want to add something? Did I? No. Questions on this part? Okay, maybe they come later. Yeah. So the final review is on the 18th of December. It's on the schedule, the same, nothing has changed. 2 to 6. We have 8 guests coming, which means that we'll be able to do again, and feel free to share your opinions here, but we will do split in 2 groups, which means that each group will have 4 external guests. And then we'll do some parallel things where we get to share. This is main reason for this is that each project gets double the time of feedback, basically, which we see as a net positive. Obviously, there's a great positive aspect to doing everything together, that everyone gets to see everyone's projects. But we think that it's more positive for you to get more feedback. If anyone has some other ideas, please share. It's an open, we can talk about this. And for those of you who are new to the studio, this will be also the first time where we have an early submission. So the studio has sometimes for midterms, but always for finals and early submission. And this means that the day before, the square where the review will be downstairs is booked from 2, which means that the setup can start from 2, but everything that you're planning to show, everything has to be in that room by 6 o'clock. Whatever is not in that room, and this sounds silly, but will not be shown at the final the day after. So basically, like, you have that whole afternoon to set up your exhibition. We'll talk about this a little bit as well. Pin everything up. Obviously, everything needs to be printed, and including setting up the screens, including submitting all of the digital files. The reasons why we do this, and we always explain this for new students, the main reason is to make sure that everyone has the chance to have a good night rest before the final review. Like 15 years of teaching, I've never really had a truly positive kind of collaborative review session if people haven't slept. And it's so that's one of the main reasons. And then also that the ambition for the review can be slightly higher, more like an exhibition, where you as a team, you have time, you have a few hours to set up. This would have been pre-planned. If there's any mistakes, then there's time, obviously, to whatever, maybe reprint something. But we are very strict with this. I share with you that the final review last semester was a bit of a disaster in this regard, and there was negotiations with the early submission deadline being 3 a.m. It was like, so we've decided that this is the first time where we really, if you don't have everything submitted by that time, you will not be presenting. That's just it. Yeah. Yes.
So, but I understand correctly that if there's like a mistake with printing, we cannot sign it up later, or does it also?
No, within these hours. So you need to be like, you start them by 2 to set up, so that you have that whole afternoon set up if there are mistakes or whatever, which means that your group obviously needs to plan that everything is done, ideally then on the 16th, so that things are printed, things are cropped, whatever needs to be happened, framed or set up. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we check if any other studio has also midterms or finals?
The square is free from 2. If that's, oh, you mean for printing?
Printing.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can check. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, because there has been moments before where, I mean, it happened with the midterm now when we didn't have early submission, but we can check and just inform you. But then it's obviously your own responsibility to do things with enough buffer. And obviously, it's good also
You can
to.
just go there and ask yourself, just for reference. They should probably know already when their dates are.
When they're, yeah.
It's faster, I guess.
And obviously you all find you're working with a new partner you haven't worked before, figuring things out. Good to have a buffer. And I would suggest also that the things you can out of this list that you are easier to finish, just make sure they're printed a week in advance, sorted. Onwards. This is the cinema where we're going to be having the final screening. I don't know who has been there. It's like one of the biggest cinemas in the country. We're really happy and excited that the team has managed to arrange this. So the idea, well, I'll talk through it a little bit, but the idea, again, we have our final review here in the building where we look at the whole project, everything all put together, and basically the project is sealed. You have then a chance, if you choose to continue updating the film part of the project for this date. the 29th. The submission, though, is on the 22nd of January. I'm going to be putting this on the screen, so it's all, and it's in the slides as well. And there's some slight different requirements for the format. But basically what's going to happen on this day from 2 to 4:30, it's an open public event that the studio is offering anyone to attend to. It's open to the public. It's open to anyone you want to bring. And the idea is that we show all of your films. It's like one long screening with possibly a little bit, we haven't figured out exactly how we do discussions. It won't be any feedback. This is a kind of celebration of this work, to be able to see it in a big space, to be able to make it a public event where people can see it in this way. There will be flyers and posters well in time, so you can invite whoever you want to invite. Yeah, so the screening in the cinema is on the 29th. This has not been emailed yet, the requirements, but it will be emailed to you. It's also in the slideshow, which will be in the link tree. There are slightly different technical requirements for this film, based on the fact that it's running on like a AAA class projector, whatever system new cinemas have, I don't know, but this is what they have given us in terms of requirements. So the ratio is also slightly different to the kind of standard 16:9. So we will have time to look at this. Let's see if I might even make a small video tutorial with, but this not a big deal, but there are some requirements. And there's also an early submission for this. So this is on the 22nd at 2 p.m. So this is already a week before. Reason for this is that we will need to put them all together, so send them to the cinema at least 5 days ahead, so that they have time to test it and make sure that there's no technical issues. But it's also because for the other things that we're going to be doing in January, which is the collaboration with the fashion department project for the festival, and also before around this time, it's also Diploma Help Week.
So it will be busy.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Oh, this is gonna delete this before I forget this. Yeah. Any questions on this? In the cinema? Okay, I'm sure there are questions about like how do we make these films and how is it different from the screening and the final review. Before I jump into the rest of the little talk today, I would advise you again to go back to this previous lecture from October, where for those of you who weren't here, again, there's a recording and there's also the slideshow available, when I talked more about cinematic techniques, framing, camera paths, etc. So I won't be talking too much about that and more focusing on these issues of spatial essays. And here is the text that is copied from the brief, so you can refer back to this again. The term spatial essay is something that we have been calling our own films in our practice. It's also a term that is growing, especially from architects working with these tools and other people in these related disciplines. Also, Uwe Brunner, who's finishing his PhD in Innsbruck, is writing a lot about what a spatial essay is, how does fit in with this broader context. And basically, the spatial video essay refers to the digital environment in which it takes place, being three-dimensional. So you're all using Unreal Engine, that is a three-dimensional environment. However, groups are encouraged to consider the support for their presentation being something other than 16:9 screen. You can, at the final in December, present your film on one projector or one screen. It being spatial, I'm going to be showing examples where you might be using more than one screen. You might be using a VR headset. You might be using other three-dimensional aspect. You might be using other live elements in the room. This is completely up to you. I'd like the full range of like you output one video versus it being more of a kind of performative aspect. And again, for the final event screening, there's only this one video file required. When we talk about a spatial essay and how it's actually presented in a room, rather than just on YouTube or on a screen, the fact that we're working in this environment of Unreal Engine, where you can have an unlimited amount of cameras and you can render out, there's a possibility to show the three-dimensionality of your stage design from multiple angles, using several screens, using different sound accesses. These are just examples of kind of video installations where a narrative is being played out on more than one surface. Or in these examples, like for instance, it's a random example, but here we can see basically there are screens on different surfaces of the space. So that is sense that you look left, you see what's left of you on the stage, or you look up, you look down, etc. Or what's also possible, which there will not be a video tutorial about, but Unreal Engine supports rendering out videos in 360. So you can like upload that to YouTube or watch it in VR, or you could then, do things like this, where you have 2 or 3 projectors, you mash them together so you can actually walk in to the space of the film. These are obviously examples of things that are huge. We have slightly limited space in the square. But what we're going to be starting to talk about today and what we want to hear from you on Thursday is initial ideas, sketches for how you could consider your film being shown in the square. And there's no formal delivery date for this, but basically all of us will take note of your ideas, how much space you need, how much equipment you need. Are you bringing your own equipment? You need a studio to provide something, you need to borrow something. And then basically we're going to be designing the setup for the final review based on that. Maybe some of you need to be in the middle of the room, some of you need a wall, some of you need to be around a column to hang things from, God knows. But so the actual setup of this film will slightly dictate the whole setup and also how you present your projects. So I'm going to be showing a few examples. Some of them I'm going to be showing the whole film. In other cases, I will just explain how we did it. And again, you can come back to this document because there's all in all like 4 hours of films in this slideshow that you can go back and look at. This is a film, it's called A Global Home, that we first showed in Milan in 2021. They're shown in Buenos Aires and right now in Chicago. And it's a spatial essay that doesn't use VR, but it has several different screens. So this is what it looked like in the space in Milan. So it's a purpose-built kind of immersive screening room that has 16 projectors, where every wall is then a virtual surface. So like apart from the door and apart from these columns that you see, all of the walls is a screen. So the film is 360. If you unwrap it, it's like it kind of has this proportion, like the ratio is crazy. But it means also the space is quite large, means that you could, in this gallery, you could walk around, stand very close to one area and really get immersed, and then turn around and see something at the other corner of the room. This specific project is actually using Blender, which is mainly just because of they all had 4K projectors, 16 4K projectors. The rendering time was something like a week and a half or something. But basically this, in theory, for something that is slightly more manageable in size, would be much faster and easier to do in Unreal. It's going to be showing a little bit of so these are like a screenshot of what you would see in one little snippet. The film is about a kind of speculative scenarios of a group of people that all live in a shared Venn room, where they're using virtual technology, immersive technology in their home, which means that they're sharing their home with others. Hence, you can see in this image, you can see like these 2 beds are like colliding with each other. The narrative, I won't go too much in detail here, but basically these are all of the different screens put together and stacked. That is the little trailers, you see. Examples of what the film looked like. And the preparation of this file, for anyone who is interested to have some kind of immersive aspect with more than one screen, we started very similar to what you were doing now, creating a non-Euclidean plan of all of these individuals who are in the film of their homes. So these are all of the different apartment or residential units and how they overlap versus the dark line in here is the space, the actual gallery space. So they're positioned in such a way that they're kind of sliced open so that from everywhere you see into part of the home. Then we started to think of like, so where are the actual vent rooms? Where are the most important components? Because in this case, we wanted the rooms to stay in the same place so that the camera doesn't actually never move. You move in the room. So like if you want to see something closer, you would literally move your body closer to one of the walls rather than the camera moving to one place. So then we had to obviously build all of these different environments. There's loads of different scenes, loads of different things happen. But this is then the overlap with the walls cropped. Here with the floor plans. And then here are the calculated curvature of the cameras so that the projection would unwrap on the wall. So here you can see however many cameras it was rendered with, and then cropped to fit with the 16 different projectors. Now when it's shown in Chicago, it only has 6 projectors, I think. But this amount of cameras, you see where the cuts are here, is where the seam is. And then what you would have to do, which is what we did then, to see what it actually would look like, is to then render out the film in 2D and build a virtual model of the gallery and put the video as a video texture on the walls and look at that in VR to see, does the deformation work? Like, do you feel like you're in the space or not? In this case, it's a continuous surface, so obviously there are no like breaks. Apart from we used this little trick here, you can see this big wall here. We had to put that in last minute because the distortion got messed up. So in some scenes we had the water looked like I had a kind of, and we couldn't figure out how to geometrically. So we put this kind of walls to hide this seam, which ended up looking quite nice also. So this is the virtual version of this to check, is the distortion working? These are the kind of files then that got sent back and forth with the technician in the gallery to figure out, is the projector projecting the exact dimension that is needed so there's no overlap and there's no further distortion, so that then eventually it worked in the gallery. Then what you can also see, it's a bit hard to see in this picture, but for further immersion, which is something that would potentially be really interesting for you to consider, is the fact that the floor also had a vinyl printed of the rest of the floor plan. So like you could look down and this is what it would look like in 1-to-1. So you see like some slippers and stuff. And if you look down, they would be the same size as your own feet. So you could follow the line of the wall from the floor and then the wall would continue in the screen. And it might be interesting to consider kind of the embodiment of either being a performer or being an audience member. Like, where do you stand in relationship to the screen or screens, or however you decide to do this? To give a kind of further sense of presence, if you have a very special moment that you want to describe, or yeah. Another much more simple example is this film we did last year for a exhibition in Timisoara, which is a it's me and Lara. Thank you. I'm gonna turn off the sound here. Again, you can watch it later if you want. It's a film about the virtual seats and how avatars use them in these shared virtual environments. Where, like in this case, me and Lara are wearing our avatars, and we are both having VR headsets, and we're in separate rooms. and we meet in this social VR space. And in this case, it's not using Unreal because the whole film is like it's more like a documentary filmed inside VR chat, which is this social VR space. But it's filmed with a 360 camera within VR chat. So actually, if I take my mouse here, I can literally, it's just from YouTube, I can pan around and look what's behind or above, because this film was shown both in VR. So like the audience member in the gallery could put on a headset and then literally see what I'm doing now. But instead of panning with a mouse, they could look around. And in most cases, there's only one thing happening in one direction. But in other cases, there's important things happening around. And we're talking a lot about the spaces we're in. We're pointing. So in some cases, you point in one direction. And then we built this like little, this is done in Unreal Engine. This is like a little video studio where, if I put on the sound again.
Where people gather in virtual spaces, interacting through avatars, almost as if they were meeting in person, yet outside the bounds and vulnerabilities of the flesh. Here we explore.
So the film is mixed kind of live interaction with people that we meet in the spaces and part kind of narration where we speak to you, the audience, directly and describe what this documentary is about and what the film is about. And then here we have these virtual screens to show examples that we're talking about. And then later in the film, so this is like, this is an example where like Lara's sitting there and I'm sitting on the other side. So in this case, you needed more than one screen or the headset in order to be able to see the full dialogue.
I guess you can do karaoke in here.
Yeah.
No, it's not like.
It's not been published, so the link in here is unlisted. So like you're free to watch the whole film if you want. But and then in the actual gallery, it was shown like this. So there's a combination of VR headsets where you could see the whole film in a more immersive way, but also in the center was this column made of 3 screens where 3 cameras were rendering from one single point of view outwards and showing it on those screens. So like this scene here, the scene that we're just seeing with Lara sitting in the diner, this scene is what the next space is over, but then folded kind of in on itself. So essentially you could also watch the whole film by walking around this installation and watching all of the screens. And obviously there's no limits to how many of these cameras you have, where you have them. If you want to have like one screen on the wall here, then in Unreal Engine, you put the camera here and you render in that direction. Then you could hypothetically have another screen at that end of the room. And in your Unreal Engine model, you put a camera there at the same distance and you render that out so that they are actually spatially connected, like that the distance is actually one-to-one to the space we have. So hypothetically, you could say like in the square, we want to have one screen in the office and one screen by the entrance and or whatever. Like,
but our projects become then completely different projects than to the screening at the cinema. Or if I now think about the square or the cinema, it's 2 completely different approaches.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So this, like, you will have to talk in the group, like, how do you square these things off? Because the examples that I'm going to be showing now, more briefly, are examples of films that were produced for VR. So they were no screens. The only way to see the film was to put on a headset. And obviously, in that sense, like, it's all about what you move around, how you move around. You can look at things very up close. You could miss things. Then, in all of these cases, we have to produce a 2D version of it that then is choosing a specific way of looking at it, which misses a lot of things. Like in this case, there's only one, it's only one shot. There's no cuts. The camera just moves around inside the space, and it misses a lot of things. Just like hypothetically in a theater play, in many cases, you're looking straight and you. But in most cases, most of your projects, things are happening spatially, where like you're maybe you as an audience member is actually also a performer. I know some people are working with these sort of ideas. where even in the actual play that you're trying to describe with this film, you can't see everything. So you will have to kind of balance the ambition with the setup in December versus the final one channel, one film. Having said that, you're just submitting one video file. It doesn't mean that the whole film is not split in two completely different views or more, right? Or you can have different cuts. You can edit things together. Yeah, I think
like a walkthrough through the whole scenery, like the stage and the whole surrounding itself, then showing some people from the movie and then jumping back and forth. Is that a possibility?
yeah, maybe we take a moment now to talk about kind of what is this film supposed to show? Because what you're describing now is a kind of like walkthrough of a space. You want to show all of the different spaces. Obviously, the projects are a design for a performance of kind, right? And the performance in many cases is like 4 hours or 2 hours long, or however long it is. So the film in December and the film in January are not showing everything, right? It's a film that describes what the stage design is doing. You will probably want to balance between descriptive things. Like in this case, if I turn on the sound again, you can see loads of things are happening.
So, 2 armchairs, a coffee table, and no telephone.
There's a voice.
With a television on it and a lamp hanging from the ceiling.
There's a voice that describes what's happening. There's a narration. So your films will have to both show to the audience what it might be like to be literally experiencing this play, you know, as closely as possible with the music, with the performers, or as close as you can to describe moments when you have really powerful, but you also want to describe how it actually works, because there's a lot of design and innovation that you're putting into these projects that you're not actually going to be building the physical stage, right? So how you balance, like within the framework of how long this video is, part of it is probably going to be descriptive, part of it is going to be actually being in moments of the play. And this is completely up to you how you do it. I think, Arthur, what you were describing, you will need to be selective of what the film shows versus what your drawings show. Maybe some things are really not so important to show in this very precious installations and films, like exactly how you enter, where the doors are. I don't know, maybe that's not, or maybe they are. You will have to think about like what are experientially the most important things that I want to show, and how do I show them? Can some of them be shown just with music and visuals? Do some of them need text? Do you even need an animated diagram at some point to show some aspects? Like in this case, in the end of this film, you know, we have been inside of this space. We're describing things, talking about things, but there's also moments in this film here, for instance, where we want to show a diagram. And how do we do this? In this case, it's like me and Laura having a video call. Then it's like talking about what it's like to be in an immersive space. And then here, the diagram of the floor plan is shown as if it's projected on a wall, rather than having it like a slideshow. In this case, it kind of becomes a whole immersive space. So you'll have to think about, like, some of the first decisions will be which aspect of our project can be described immersively, which part of the project has to be described diagrammatically or verbally even. Other examples, this is a film that was shown here at the MAC a few years ago, which is about portals. This is the physical installation, only a VR headset. There is also on the screens here, bits of the film can be seen, but you sit down at the table and you watch the film, and like this, and you could touch the table, you could move your body around. The actual film then has music.
The stories we tell are full of portals. We read about them in books, see them on the screen.
And then there's a narration that describes this. Most of the cases, there is a narrator that talks through the whole film.
Physics,
So it's,
Instantly send
again,
person
the spatial
to
essay part, it's kind of like,
even other dimensions.
it's actually an essay that's being
Sometimes the
performed in a
word
spatial
is used to
setting.
provide a transformative
So in some
experience
cases, there's
or
text
to a different
to
state.
describe some of the things that are more important. In other cases, it's fully immersive. In some cases, uh, the elements in the room are being used to describe diagrammatic aspects. And in other cases, just fully immersive, where big things are happening around you and you're experiencing and seeing is kind of taking over. One interesting maybe thing to mention here is that this film, because it was produced in Unreal Engine, we also made performances with this film. So what you're seeing here is me and Lara performing at the V&A. Like we are literally inside of the virtual space using these. You see, Lara's having this stick there, and I'm having this other thing. You see there at the top, there's a little tracker. Studio doesn't have any of these trackers, but there's other ways to do this. Where basically, I'm holding the camera, so the tracker is linked to where the camera is inside Unreal Engine, and Lara is acting as a sort of guide. You see that ring there on the screen? So she was kind of conducting where I should be looking. And live, as I'm moving this thing around, I'm seeing different part of the virtual space. So this is the kind of dimensions of thinking about the space and the actual play that's in the stage that somehow exists in your Unreal Engine files versus how do you choose to look at it, both in December and at the final film screening. And in this case, you miss some things because the audience cannot choose what to look at. Like we didn't ask people to like, Lara's helping me to guide. When you're wearing a headset, you can look wherever you want. But then also, as you saw here, we produced this completely two-dimensional version of this film too.
Also includes the marble image character.
Then we have some examples that I probably will only, maybe we can look at this one, but there's examples of former student work that have done spatial essays that in these cases have been all 2D, all kind of 16:9 setup. And there's about 10 of them here. I suggest that you in your own time watch them. These are like a selection out of, I don't know, 50 or 60 spatial essays that former students have produced, and they have nothing to do with place. They're all very different, but the format might be interesting to look at. So I think we look a little bit at this one by Tammy. So what's interesting?
What do you have? Welcome to remote virtual tourism in Bangkok. A short film exploring the future of traveling, where travels can be done virtually and remotely to Bangkok, while being physically elsewhere. Open your eyes to a city unlike any other, the Venice of the East, where the East and the West come together. Immerse in the tropical sun in the midst of nature. To the exotic tradition. Venturing through the market of eclectic crafts, antiques, and new findings.
So since it's not so important what at this moment, what the project's actually about, I'll just turn off the sound. I think what's interesting with many of these examples, especially Tammy's film here, is how different spaces are woven together. Like you can see that in this case, there's not been any cuts yet. Like often in a stage play, you're just actually in the same environment and things just change around you. So when the camera is changing direction to reveal a different kind of space, when it's moving forward, what it's moving through, and how these different kind of spatial cuts are made, let's say. In this case, there's a kind of stark cut to when, if we turn on the volume here.
similar to the map drawn in 1584 by a European priest. The map illustrated the Christ route from his arrival in Jerusalem to the Last Supper, allowing his followers to imagine a trip of going to Jerusalem.
So in this case, Tammy is like describing part of the research that is behind the project. In this case, it might be about how the play has been performed in the past, if you want to include that in the film. But it's still done in a spatial way. It's still put together in a way where like it kind of you're traveling through the spaces of also the, let's say, diagrammatic part of the project. There are many other examples here, filmed by Deborah about a project in Singapore that also used very, very interesting ways for when the camera is transferring from different angles, different sizes of things are shifting to describe different qualities. Some cases it goes almost more into a kind of slideshow mode. There's text used. And again, there's no real kind of, all your projects will be so different that how you actually do this will be up to you. I would again suggest that you go through and look at some of these examples. All of them are describing, every project has its own complexities, all difficulties in describing what they're about, using extremely innovative ways to describe that using the film medium.
A compression.
And also extremely innovative ways, in many cases, how the camera is revealing different kinds of spaces. In this case, this table, the camera gets very, very tiny and moves in towards this thing that turns out actually to be a diagram of how the project works. So I encourage you to go and look at these. But I think we spend the last couple of minutes now to, if there's further questions before we take a short break and then move into smaller groups. Or do you have anything to add?
Maybe a question about, so the essay is basically us presenting, like we're not gonna really talk about it should speak for itself.
That's a good question. Yeah. So it should speak for itself definitely in January, because it's just a screening. You won't be talking over it, right? So however much you want to describe of what the project does, which might not be everything, needs to speak for itself. Which means that you might want to record voice, or you might want to write things that ends up being things like subtitles, or other ways to communicate information that is not directly evident by just looking at it. And since the idea is really that these films, they should be finished in December. You're making small edits, you're converting it into re-rendering it maybe to fit the dimensions of the cinema screen. But at the presentation, you might choose to let the film do the presenting if you want. So you record the voices beforehand, and you mainly allow people to step into it. Obviously, you will have other things there. You will have drawings, you will have diagrams, your resource map. You won't be done completely silent, but you could let the film do all of the explaining if you want. And it's a good thing that you brought that up, because it also, I would suggest obviously that you already do all of the work so that you do not rely on the time over Christmas to do that part for the screening in the cinema. Yeah. Yeah. So in a way, it is a kind of presentation. Yes. Yeah. But obviously, how much you choose to present in the cinema, it's also up to you. No one is going to go like, I don't get it. It's an experience, right? But obviously you're not showing the whole play. So you need some way abstract and conceptualize how you present without just chopping it up. And you take 1 minute from the first scene and 1 minute from the next scene and you just put them together. Maybe that wouldn't make much sense. And there will probably be performative, spatial, architectural aspects that you want to explain that are not so evident without being slightly diagrammatic or having a voiceover.
So it's up to us how much we show, what we want to show.
Yeah, yeah. And again, at the final, like in the cinema, in basically like your projects would have already been assessed in a way. So like you can think about it like also like an artistic presentation of the project. No one is going to go like, I don't get it in that sense. But the final review in December, however, obviously we are looking at these like architectural projects. Like we want to understand how they work. Drawings, presentations should be very clear. Where like, where is audience members? Where's the performance? How long is it? How are you using virtual elements, etc. And also the aspects of like the resource map. Where is your resources coming from? How have you made the assets? Looking at the asset library, etc. So you could choose to let your presentation do most of that work, and the video, the spatial essay. But obviously, I would imagine that you would want to use this opportunity to really describe the project. And that's why these films are here, because in all of these cases of these student projects here, these videos was the only presentation material that the students did. So all of the work, in many cases, a year of work, is all in this one film. All of the research, all of the design, all of the thoughts, everything is baked into this basically presentation, you can say. Yeah. Anything else? Then we'll talk about it when we break up in groups. Should we take a little break then? Should we be back? Should we take 10 or 15? 10? Okay. So 10 past we start.
I thought